In this video, we'll learn the difference between adulteration and misbranding as it pertains to prescription medications. Okay, let's start off with adulteration. Simply put, adulteration refers to the cleanliness and purity of a prescription drug product. So if a drug is impure, unsafe, or contaminated, it can be considered adultered. So just think of it as when something unauthorized or potentially harmful is introduced into a drug. But let's look further into it. The easiest way to think about adulteration is to imagine looking into the prescription bottle and at the drug itself. Adulteration is what is happening or what can potentially happen to this drug. A common example is contamination by molds, bacteria, and other microorganisms, which would make it adultered. Other examples can be if it contains an unsafe color additive, something in the container or the container itself is composed of a poisonous substance or any substance that can contaminate the drug. And finally, if anything happens to this drug that turns its strength into something other than it's supposed to be, it's adulterated. So one last thing about adulteration that is often overlooked. So remember when I said to think of what can potentially happen to the drug? When thinking about adulteration, you also have to look at the facility in which the drug was made or stored. If at any point a facility does not meet current good manufacturing practices, those drugs are considered adultered. Some examples of failures to meet CGMPs can be contamination issues, inadequate record keeping, poor quality control, lack of validation, such as a drug facility not validating its manufacturing processes, failure to calibrate or maintain equipment, all the way down to inadequate employee training. So that's adulteration. So now, let's move on to misbranding. So with misbranding, we're now looking at the prescription label and the information that may accompany it. So if any information here is misleading, inaccurate, or lacking required information, this is misbranded. So essentially, it's about the information provided rather than the actual composition of the drug. Misbranding examples can include situations where the label fails to include necessary warnings or precautions or contraindications. For example, if the label clearly doesn't state potential side effects or known interactions with other medications, it could possibly be considered misbranding. Also, if the label provides false or misleading information about the drug's efficacy or dosing instructions, this is also misbranding. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the labeling requirements are meant for the manufacturer's container. The labeling on the prescription container given to the patient may not need to require all the necessary labeling components. All right, so that's the basics of adulteration and misbranding. But now let's get into some examples. Example 1. A distributor stores temperature-sensitive insulin vials in improper conditions, causing the medication to degrade and lose its potency. Is this an example of adulteration, misbranding, or both? If you said adulteration, You're correct. And let me illustrate why. So from this example, picture a distribution center making a bunch of insulin vials. And let's say each vial is supposed to be 100 units per milliliter. So when these vials get stored, they're supposed to keep that same potency. But these vials were allowed to be stored incorrectly. Let's say these vials became too hot. So now their strength went from 100 units per ml to, let's say, 50 units per ml. This does not equal the concentration they were intended to be. Therefore, they're adultered now. So at this point, there's no labeling involved. There's no drug information accompanying the drug. So it can't be misbranding quite yet. But let's say this adultered drug made it out of the distribution center into the public and had a label slapped onto it that said it was, in fact, 100 units per ml. Now what you have here is both adulteration and misbranding, because this label is now misleading. It's not 100 units per ml because it's still 50 units per ml. Now let's try a second example. Brain gummies is a dietary supplement found over the counter. On its label, it states just one gummy a day can improve memory and cure Alzheimer's. It is discovered that there is no scientific evidence to support this claim. Now, is this adulteration, misbranding, or both? If you said misbranding, you are correct. Okay? So in this example, we are discussing claims made on the labeling of the bottle. Now, although these gummies are ineffective, nothing really happened to them to alter them or affect them. So no contamination was introduced into it, no bacteria, no storage conditions turned them ineffective. They're just naturally ineffective gummies. Therefore, they can't be adultered. Once this label made an unsubstantiated claim that it cured Alzheimer's with no scientific evidence to support it, it became misleading. And misleading information points to misbranding. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, well, I've seen many over-the-counter supplements that make health claims without the support of scientific evidence. How is this not misbranding? Well, the key thing to keep in mind is the language that is used on those labels. Over-the-counter supplements should avoid making claims that suggest that they can either cure, treat, or prevent specific diseases. Instead, they focus on general health claims that promote well-being, such as support or promotes. So you may see a product say, this supports joint health, or this promotes heart health. That enables them to avoid being misbranded products. Alright, so that is the end of the video. I hope it did well to clear up some of the concepts of adulteration and misbranding. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to write some in the comments. I'll be happy to help.